Supercalifragilistic. Thank you, Mrs. What is that show from?
Hi, I'm Jess. I'm a creative director by day and a third culture blog by night.
And I'm Thea, an innovation manager by day and a biohacking enthusiast by night.
Yay!
And today we're talking about discrimination.
Discrimination.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So how do we feel about that?
This is a word that takes a lot of time to unpack, but
Yes.
I feel like as third culture people, we witness different types of discriminations everywhere.
So what is discrimination?
Once again, we Googled it, and from Google, it says discrimination is the unjust or prejudicial treatment. Prejudicial.
Wow, that's a really tough word.
I know. Prejudicial. Let's pretend that's how it sounds.
Okay.
Let us know. Treatment of different categories of people, especially on the grounds of ethnicity, age, sex, or disability.
Yeah. Prejudicial.
Yes.
Yes. Prejudice.
Prejudice.
Pride and prejudice.
So it's prejudicial?
Ah.
Prejudicial.
Something like that. Yeah. So discrimination, I feel like there's always elements of this in every society, everywhere we go. Can't escape it because humans are very flawed.
Yeah.
What are we going to do?
Yeah.
But what do you think it is in the context of third cultural adults?
So first of all, I want to mention why we decided to add this into our topics. Like by the time we filmed this, not so like a few days before we filmed this, not sure everyone's aware of this, but Met Gala just happened, and we saw this news about a photographer at Met Gala on the red carpet commenting microaggressively and not so microaggressively.
Yes, I was like, I don't think that's micro. It's quite aggressive.
Being racist towards K-pop group straight in their face. And of course, soon after, a few unwise aspects from this photographer's. One is 2024. What are you doing? Also, it's Met Gala. There's a reason why they get invited to that event. Also, never mess with K-pop.
Yeah, because the K-pop fans are gonna...
They will find you, and they found him, and they did a bunch of shit. Point is, that incident kind of stirred up the whole discrimination, of course, in that incident, specifically towards Asian.
So there's so many different elements of it. There's like racial, because third culture kids don't really look in the race, and so people don't act in the way that you expect them to because of stereotypes. There's gender as well. Different cultures, I don't know, in one country maybe you act a certain way with a certain gender, and then in another culture maybe it's not so accepting of that gender to act a certain way. There's also people with health conditions and impairments as well. There's a lot of cultures that are way behind in how those people are being treated. And if you're a third culture person with a disability and are moving around, maybe things aren't as accessible to you. And that comes from even physical or invisible or even like having access to news that have visual impairment. And things like that.
Yeah.
Also, age.
An age.
Some countries they have ageism, like whether you're too young, too old. And then, socioeconomic classes, status. Some countries are very classist.
Yeah, so I think like both of us, we checked a lot of boxes from there. It's like first, before moving to Japan, we were in countries that predominantly white. So we were seen as minorities based on race. But also, women worldwide is discriminated for centuries. And
It's crazy how, and maybe this is just like a weird example, but in America, I mean, there's a huge thing about discrimination and racial discrimination.
Yeah.
But they would rather vote Trump than a woman president because she's female. I mean, I'm sure there's more to it, but that's kind of like the message that I get from it.
But I think that's one wake-up call, at least in the States, not to go into too much into politics.
Yeah.
But that's when you realize only the big cities is more open-minded.
Yeah.
But majority of the states not.
Yeah. That's with any country as well. I find, you know, the bigger cities are more liberal.
It's hard. Even now, like we started to talk about like what's it to be a feminist and how to treat different types of genders more equally. It's still a challenge because I feel like as long as patriarchy is still a thing, nothing much is gonna change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what kinds of discrimination have you faced in the various cultures? In the long list of things, what are some of the highlight reel?
So I think my highlights are definitely being Asian woman, but also what a lot of people they don't know is I am identified as a handicapped person back in Taiwan because I do have and carry 22 screws in my back the whole time. But the thing is,
Are they heavy?
You know, when I was little, I blamed my weight gain to my screws.
Like,
And then I went to the doctor. I'm like, are they actually heavy? Because I feel like I gain weight. And then they're like, it's like very lightweight stainless
Probably
steel.
lighter than your bones.
Exactly. So no, they're not heavy. However, I'm.
But the weight of the burden of it is heavy.
Yeah, and also I'm actually in constant pain of some sort. I'm very used to it by now, but I do still challenge, like, can't go to crowded places, and, you know, a lot of roller coasters I cannot go on, and
sad.
yeah, and then it definitely takes more energy out of me during the day just by,
Your spoons are less.
yeah, but no one would know from just looking at me because all my four limbs are still, like, moving as they seemingly should. But what they don't know is, like, that whole thing is stuck. Yeah. So I feel like my highlights of discrimination, definitely the most obvious is when I was back in the States. Because I did go through the whole period of going into pandemic, Black Lives Matter, Asian hate, coming out of that, coming to Japan. So on the street, like, I used to get racial slur all the time, right? But not only that, I think we also talked about this before, is I kind of, I kind of experience a lot of, like, microaggression because me being a woman, because me being Asian, and a lot of, like, backhanded compliments, like, oh, you as a person, you're so vocal, you know, like, what to say. I'm like, yeah, because I didn't have a choice. And then two, you know, like, now I look this way. I have all my tattoos with me. When I go back home, not just States, Taiwan, also in Japan, anytime I require, like, some physical support, people will look at me like, why?
Like, so why would we help you?
Yeah, like, they're like, you're not supposed to sit in the priority seats. So it's like, yeah, a lot of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's rough.
What about you? Like, because I know I'm pretty intact with all the discrimination incidents in the States. But what about in Europe? What's it like when you're in Germany?
It's a different kind of racism. I felt in Canada it was based on ignorance rather than their intention to actually hurt me. So for me, in this small town in Canada, I just kind of brushed it off being like, oh, hey, what's up? what's up, I'm Chinaman, like, you know. I didn't lean into it, but it was more of like they were just ignorant. And so over time I kind of grew to accept it because I couldn't change them unless I educated them. In Europe it was different because it felt very mean-spirited. It felt very like they actually really didn't like me for being Asian. And it wasn't ignorance, it was more like, I don't know, intentional discrimination, I felt. And I think I brought up this case in this airport. And I felt that was like very, well, I guess that's microaggressions. But during this Stop Asian Hate as well in Berlin, there were a lot of people who were attacking Asian people. And not just like any Asian people, but Asian people who looked frail, like female and older Asian people. And I think that's the same in the States as well. So I don't know, maybe I just made a very general comment, and I'm sure there's, you know, ignorant racism everywhere as well. And also intentional discrimination in Canada too. But I think that's kind of the difference that I noticed as a kid in rural Canada versus an adult in Berlin.
Yeah, I think that's also a little bit in the States because the whole myth of model minority, like even though we are a kind of minority, somehow other minority communities, they don't like us. So because of what they perceive, right, from the white supremacy, like model minority is not a thing. Like just because you're Asian in the States, you don't get the privilege like white people get. But that's somehow the image a lot of people have over the community. And like when you mentioned about the airport incident, like I also had a fair share from an officer one time saying that I think at that time I forgot one of the document in my luggage and a check-in luggage, so I couldn't show it, but I had the rest, right? And they have records in the system. But the officer literally told me that, do you know just with one button I can send you right back and you can never enter the country?
Wow. Yeah. What a threat. They're just power tripping at this point.
Yeah. And then I think in that incident it's like, but you can tell the difference between how they treat visitors that are people of color and when they're not.
I find that's the biggest thing about that's why I wanted to move back to an Asian country, because I was so tired of feeling like a second-class citizen. And I knew that, you know, just from being in a white country, it was just exhausting for me to always feel that.
I think that's why like when I just moved to Japan, it was such a like a refreshing experience because it's been a very long time since I spent my time in a country that I am seen as a majority racially, and not saying that then everything is rainbow and sunshine,
right, because there's a different type of discrimination here to, you know, females or other genders,
but definitely it took a lot of heavy weight off of my shoulders.
It tells you something that we're willing to put up with all the things that are behind here just to escape from that overall.
You experience racist moments, but you count them as ignorant. So and because you also don't want to spend the energy to educate them, you just go along with it, and then that in some way of course kind of reinforce the whole racist or discriminative events to keep happening. But at the same time, we're already so exhausted from the taking on all the bullets.
I think it would also have been different if I lived in somewhere that had a different socioeconomic classes as well, because I think I was in the poor area and they knew I was poor and they were poor. It was kind of, you know, on the same level, whereas I think if I moved to like a well-to-do area and they saw someone that was foreign, I think it would be a little bit different in terms of how I felt as a second-class citizen.
Just to be clear, like we know that even among Asian, right, our skin is pale. So we are also way more privileged than a lot of people. But even with that, like the discrimination we experience is quite frequent. Also based on because we keep moving around, and then the fact that we are trying to adapt into a certain society, trying to learn a certain social cue, and then among those period, we receive things that it's seemingly familiar negatively, but still trying to navigate how to do anything about it.
I think the biggest difference being in a country where you're not the majority versus the country where you are the majority but maybe experience some discrimination is the discrimination is from strangers in the countries where you're the minority. Because you don't know them but they just judge you on what you look like. Whereas in the majority country, it's discrimination from people that you speak to or interact with. So I don't know what's worse. I don't think there's better or worse.
There's no better or worse. And I think, again, that's all going back to just us trying to code switch and then fit into a system or society that's not from the start built for us. I think that's why there are so many different kinds of discrimination, because everything's come from that one cookie cutting system that people are expected to fit into. And then in any way you are not the perfect fit, people started to judge you for it. What I wasn't prepared for is, let's say, for example, at work, I'm very used to standing up for myself, right? Because I had to back in the States. But at work, if I try to stand up for myself, there's a sense of I'm being super disrespectful. I don't know how to read the room.
Right, and it's so hierarchical.
And then that's something that's like I didn't really experience the same way back in the States, because there's no hierarchy per se in the same way. So whoever is there to speak up, you just speak up. So over here, I think that's like one thing I had a minor culture shock, but also started to remember, back in the days, that was a thing. And
I touched on this a little bit in the identity episode as well, where I returned to Japan after I was done college to move here forever. And I was 21 at the time. And I hated it because there was a lot of sexism, there was a lot of discrimination. Like, I just tried to be a normal person, and I got things like, oh, you shouldn't laugh with your mouth open, or there's all these, like, things about me being othered all the time that I would never, trying to make friends with locals, and they'd be like, oh, but you're a gaijin, so you wouldn't get it kind of thing. So, microaggressions and things like that. So I think my first time back in Japan when I was in my early 20s was the most unexpected, and I actually very quickly left because I was so hurt that my identity as a Japanese person did not match the reality.
So speaking of, I also remember another thing that's like from work setting, since this is why we moved here. Mostly it happens at work setting. But about sexism, it's also very different over here. I think in the States, performative or not, people are trying to do something about it. Like now they're trying really hard to lean in more when a woman speak, right? But over here it's still not a thing. So like whenever I trying to say something in a meeting or even just a conversation, I did realize like they tend to not pay attention or just
direct the question to the man.
And then I'm like, oh, that's nostalgic to me. And also like one time I heard this, I wasn't there in person, but there was this like supposedly women empowering event at someone's job, and then they said what they heard is some panelists telling the women to dress in certain ways so they don't give a wrong idea to men. But like,
how is that empowering?
They're like, we're here to support you. Let us teach you how to dress. But like, again, back in the States, we have the privilege of, because everyone's starting to talk about it, we're more vocal. So everyone's just like, we dress how we dress. It's your problem to think how you think.
Yeah.
So that's another thing I was like, oh, that's interesting.
You know what I find also in Japan is that discrimination is very hush-hush.
Yeah.
So in other places, quite obvious, but here it's very, what do you call, like two-facedness, or, you know, they put on that mask, or passive-aggressiveness, I think. So there's a lot of discrimination in their mindset, but it's not outwardly evident.
They don't want to rock the boat.
Exactly. So it's hard to pinpoint, or it's hard to call people out on discrimination because it becomes passive-aggressive microaggressions. As TCKs, we also get to pick which culture that we identify with depending on the situation.
Yeah, we talked about this.
Yeah.
Like, in my favor, I get to choose what kind of nationality I'm going to call myself.
Right, like
after.
boba tea.
Boba tea is definitely Taiwanese. Japanese love Taiwanese.
Yeah.
So in their eyes, I don't mind calling myself Taiwanese.
Yeah.
And not mention I'm American. And then they probably will think I'm so cool. Because I also speak American accent English.
Yeah.
Something like that. But yeah, that definitely helped because in all seriousness, that's also a way to protect yourself. I feel like back in the States, I definitely avoid mentioning I was born in Taiwan. I spent a certain amount of time in Taiwan before I go to the States.
Yeah.
Because a long time ago, when we had our first episode, I did say about the naming. I did say about like how people had assumptions over when you say where you're from. If it's not some culture they're familiar with, they always just see you as, oh, then maybe you have problem comprehending for some reason.
Yeah. Oh, we don't want to hire this person because...
Yeah, and then
it would
they
be
start to like nitpicking how you say things, how you like form an opinion.
Yeah,
all that.
Just like in the States, there are so many studies where people have changed their name from like a foreign sounding name to an American sounding
That's
name.
Me.
That is you.
That's me.
Yeah.
And also like we also talked about the language part. If I didn't say I was from Taiwan and I just straight up talking to you, and then you will feel like, oh, Jess's English is perfect. The moment I said I'm actually from Taiwan, English was once my second language, you started to nitpick in your mind, being like, oh, maybe the way she said that sentence formed really weird. So I think in the States, I'm like, I'm American. And over here, I'm like, I'm Chinese.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm blessed in that both Canadian and Japanese are non-polarizing for the most part, depending on where you are. But I think more in the workplace setting than I say I'm Canadian, just so I don't have to deal with all the politics of being Japanese in a Japanese workplace.
Yeah. I think also like this is like not so often being brought up, but there's also another incident. I went to this nail salon, and then all the aunties, they're from China. And in the beginning, of course, everyone's like talking English. They did not know how much Chinese I know.
You have that a lot, actually, even here.
Yeah. And then, but then they ask in English, like, oh, where are you from? And I'm like, oh, I'm from Taiwan. I was expecting them to be nice to me because I'm like, oh, we're like, you know, same ancestor. And then, but straight up in front of me, they're like doing their thing, but they start talking among each other.
Yeah.
In Chinese, starting to be like, oh, but you know, like, Taiwan's not a country. Like, it's, I don't know why they keep telling people they're like Taiwanese when they should just say they're Chinese. And then right in front of my face, and I'm just like, I don't know, man. Like, should I just tell them I know everything, or should I just like, I
think they know that you would know, right?
I don't know.
At this point, they're kind of just like trying to...
No, but there's also like a impression in the States that if you say you're blank American, and then they will assume, especially older generation, they're like, oh, you probably didn't really study in language school or weekend school when you're kids, so you probably understand the most, like the minimal in that language.
Yeah.
So I also, experienced discrimination as such when it comes to nationality.
That's true. Which countries do you think are doing well in dealing with discrimination? Throwing it back at you.
Doing well?
Yeah. Or how do they deal with discrimination? Is there any sort of way that you think has worked better?
I think I can only speak for the country that I spent my most time in, which is the States, right? And then like I said, there's a privilege in people are encouraged to speak up. There's a privilege in people are more celebrated when you are trying to stand up for yourself in different scenarios.
Yeah.
And it's almost ironic because recent years when people are trying to speak up for discrimination, it's almost like a trend. But
There's like a bit of fake wokeness to it.
fake wokeness. But in a
But
way,
it's better than nothing.
exactly. In a way, and hindsight is that has been a way for people to adjust their corporate system, adjust like how they share their resources, and trying to help on surface level or not any way they can towards different minorities, different types of community that's being discriminated. Yeah.
I'm gonna go right out and say Asian countries are really bad at dealing with discrimination. Because it's kind of like don't ask, don't tell. People don't want to talk about it. It's all hush hush. They pretend that it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Because we all live in a perfect world. And I don't know if that's like that in Taiwan as well.
Yeah, it is. I think it's frustrating to me personally just because I had been pretty vocal back in the States, especially during the Stop Asian Hate.
Yeah.
And why it was so exhausted to advocate subjects matters like this is because not even in Asia, like Asian community in the States, it's the same thing. It's like if your ancestor and your parents, they taught you to be more hush hush. It's so hard to like bring people together and be like, we all recognize there's a problem and unjust behaviors towards our community. Let's do something about it. Like the few times when I started to address those issues and then openly talk about my experience, I would get comments from people within the same community being like, why are you trying to cause us trouble? Like, why are you trying to shine lights on us when all we want to do is just like live in peace?
Yeah.
So it's really challenging, not to mention like going back to Asia, that's just the thing.
Yeah.
People don't want to talk about it, even though everyone's like exhausted from being discriminated in so many different ways. Like women being treated a certain way, that's not right. That's like really fucked up.
It's a whole societal mindset.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure like if someone's trying to say something, a lot of women would be like, why are you trying to do that? We didn't ask you to do that. And if you're dealing with like sexuality injustice, the same thing. If you're dealing with like racial justice in Asia, the same thing. Like, it's frustrating.
Yeah, it really is. And even if you have a discrimination case and you wanted to deal with it, going to the police is often not going to do much as well, in many countries as well.
Yeah. So I think
or saying that something is a case of discrimination is hard to prove. You have to have hard evidence.
Again, it's like the microaggression. How are you going to prove
that this person's being sexist or racist or ableist?
You're like, why? And then you're like, because they're staring at my legs. Well, then why are you wearing a short skirt? Things like that. Happens all the time.
Yeah, it's so sad.
Yeah.
Change doesn't come without challenging the status quo.
I know.
And people only do that when they're dissatisfied. And so people who are already happy, like, the rich people.
Yeah, but it's just like the privilege, even what I often remind myself and also my friends who are back in the States when we're trying to talk about this topic is the reason why we get to live in peace is because people who are risking their safety, they're risking their peace to fight for something so that we get to live in a system that's like, oh, we don't see anything wrong.
Yeah. So how do you think we can effectively deal with discrimination as third culture kids, or anyone really?
I was an activist for Asian API community in the States, but I wasn't the one who was like trying to go. I didn't go out and protest and stuff. Why? Because my status is on visa. the moment you get caught in those events, you get deported, right? So a lot of people, they also didn't know that side of it. They're like, Jess, you call yourself an activist. We don't see you on the street yelling. And I'm like, yeah, because safety also matters to me. But one thing I learned is it's really draining to soak yourself into that kind of environment. So I really don't blame anyone who chose to have their peace, but just like do anything you can to survive, right? I feel like some people, they're built to have more bandwidth and space to educate other people, which is good. I feel like if anyone deserve the access to resources to make themselves better, know more. But it's also on them to educate themselves. On the other side, as minorities of any sort or people who get discriminated, it's your choice to be the educator, the shepherd, or you just want to follow. It's really,
or at least even if you're following, or even if you're, staying quiet, at least be a supporter somehow. You don't have to be vocal about it, but if something happens where they need your support, or
again,
maybe
it's such
someone talks to you about it.
But it's such a challenging mindset, especially, let me say it straight up, in Japan. The time that in my previous job, someone with a similar identity come to me and tell me to shut up. Not straight up, because they don't do straight up. But in a way that, I will suggest you next time not to talk about this like so straightforwardly. Maybe just keep it to yourself, or like, I know how you feel, but also like maybe they have, just let it go, because like boys will always be boys.
Ooh, yeah.
That kind of comments, I get that more than 5 times so far that I'm in this country, which I really don't endorse. I find the best way to deal with discrimination is just kill them with kindness, or ask them to repeat themselves if they say something that's discriminatory or rude. So anytime that's not even just with discrimination, but if someone says something off color about me or my character, unless it's warranted, of course. I'm sure I do a lot of stupid shit, but then I'm like, hey, can you repeat that? Or just ask them to be like, wait, what? You're way kinder than I am.
Or just be like, what did you can you clarify what you meant by that? Because in one, you either give them a chance to realize they're an asshole, or 2, then they have to explain what they meant, and maybe they didn't actually mean it in a certain way. So I am more aggressive in that like mindset, or I'm less forgiving, let's say. Not that I'm less forgiving, but it just like, I think, at least in the States, the whole thing about being discriminated, or being a minority, or being a BIPOC. You're just fed up.
Because we as a whole dealt with so much shit through generations, so that the other side can get to do whatever they want. Now you don't get to say that because I didn't know that was harmful. So I feel like everyone should hold themselves accountable. If you didn't mean it, own up to it, saying that I didn't know better, but I'll do better next time. But I don't, like, I used to kill people with kindness in that situation, but the amount of discriminations I witnessed on my friends and onto myself, I'm like, enough is enough. Hold my earrings.
Oh, if it gets physical, then I'm in there.
Sure.
So like when you face discrimination, you having this multiple cultural background as a TCK has helped you navigate it either better or in a way to shine light on the discrimination.
For sure. Because I feel like the blessing in disguise of being a TCK and experiencing / witnessing different discriminative incidents is you got your practice. So
well seasoned.
You're well seasoned. So you start to gather vocabularies, you start to have
like identifying what you feel.
Because definitely like years back, I didn't, even though I felt weird in certain situations, didn't know why.
Right, that's just with the microaggressions as well.
But now, like, I can know why. I can identify exactly which part made me uncomfortable, because the things I've seen, the things I've heard, the things I've personal experience.
Yeah.
I will bring up one challenges though. Is like, you know how I mentioned about the whole myth of model minority? I think that's a global thing, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah. But specifically in the States, the whole model minority took a toll on a lot of us when we were trying to speak up for ourselves. I had the honest conversations with my friends, which was like very necessary. It was really hard and difficult to kind of have that conversation respectfully because everyone's like
very emotional.
Very emotional. This is like hit so close to the home.
Yeah.
And but we're trying to understand each other. I think that's the beauty of it, is like you're trying to understand one another.
Yeah, because there's so many different sides to the story, right?
Exactly. So we're not. So she was like, I just want to try to understand like why all of a sudden a lot of Asian activists, they start to speak up. This is news to me, and then I kind of explain the cultural aspect. I'm like, you know, as Asian, at least to me, and then a lot of my friends that I know, we were taught not to say anything in majority of incidents. So even anything happened to us, if we can swallow it, we'll swallow it. And then in order to survive, we were not taught to have this very outspoken, like, unity spirit for the community, but we're taught to be very passive so we can keep the peace.
Yeah.
And then just don't, you know, I want to make up the phrase, but just like shake the river. So the shake the river.
What? Shake the river?
Shake the lake. I don't know. I have this image in my head. I'm butchering it. Anyway, just so I was like explaining the context, right? So it's not that the hate crime is a new thing. It's been happening. Like, there are so many books about it. There are so many people who actually, if you go into local news, you're like, maybe find one column of some Asian grandpa got attacked, or some like bodega or laundry mat get attacked, but nobody is talking about it because that just, unfortunately, part of the culture.
Yeah, it's probably also not classified as a hate crime.
Exactly, because again, nobody is like advocating as much. We started to have the privilege to do so because of social media.
That's
because
true,
people started to share videos. That's how we started.
Yeah. I feel like there's so many, that can go one way or the other though, because now with all these Karen videos, for example, you know, you have all these people who are freaking out on video, but we don't know what happened before that.
Exactly. Again, everything is about context, right? So I think that's why
we're just getting fed. What
that's why I didn't mind to, before I react to a comment, before I react to a certain message, like when I was being vocal, I got death threats, really fucked up comments through social medias, but instead of immediately react to it and being affected by it, I tried really hard to be like, if you're willing, do you want to have a conversation about this? Because I'm curious why you think that way. Yeah.
Everything's better with more understanding and communication.
Yeah, and then because me and my friend had that conversation, right? We realized that it's really a huge part is because we're all, to say bluntly, fooled by the same system. Yes,
yeah.
And that's very simple. That was it. So.
Anti-disestablishmentarianism. What does that even mean, actually?
I just really like that word. You and your big words, man.
Supercalifragilistic. Thank you, Mrs. What is that show from? What is that from? It's from something. Like
what, the big words?
Heidi, no.
The big words?
Mrs. Doubtfire, no.
No, that's Mary Poppins.
Mary Poppins.
Wow. Wow. Now you're discriminating all the nannies.
Is that a nanny discrimination? Is that a new category?
I don't know.
I think that's ageism.
That's a nanist.
So, as a final question, to wrap this up, how can we, as a TCK community, use our unique perspective to help fight discrimination or, you know, bring light to it and promote inclusivity?
Start a conversation. I feel like personally, I think don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah. get some understanding of other perspectives.
Yeah, and then don't be afraid to be corrected. Because I personally ask a lot of dumb questions to my friends in other communities, and then I will be upfront being like, call me out if this is ignorant. Call me out if this is not okay to ask.
Yeah, keep an open mind. Communicate that you can be called out, because you know, when people come to you very aggressive about an opinion, you're kind of always afraid to tell them, well, maybe, you know, there's this, this, and this, because they're just so passionate about it. But if you come at it, you know, you can come at it with emotion, but also be like, but tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, and I think even especially in Asian world, Asian countries, Asia. Don't be afraid to, even with people you know, like closer friends, to start having those conversations. It really helps. Like, I majority talked about my race, but it applies to all kinds of different areas and categories. Right? But before you start to ask questions, if you just functions with your assumptions, that's all why there are so many discriminations. Because our assumptions usually wrong.
Humans are very bad at assuming or assumptions or guessing.
It's usually wrong.
Yeah, it's usually wrong.
Yeah, so do your research, ask questions, don't generalize.
Also pick your battles, not everything.
Exactly. That's another thing.
You're going to be drained every time.
Exactly. So I think it's a personal choice. Don't feel that you have to. It's hard enough.
It is hard enough.
To survive.
To be alive.
To be alive.
Tell us, have you ever felt discriminated against? I think that's like a beginning of a rap song. Eminem does something like that.
Drop the bar. Drop the bar.
Have you ever felt discriminated against?
Okay, that's terrible. That's terrible. Yeah, but again, this is just the beginning of this topic. There's so many different things. Again, we recognize our privilege as well.
That is true.
The fact that we get to sit here comfortably talk about things itself is a privilege. Huge privilege. And when it comes to privilege, it comes discrimination.
We didn't even get into political or religious discrimination as well. Oof. Which, those like start wars.
Those start wars.
But I feel like that's a very touchy subject. It's time for a contemplation of the day! Yay! Alright, GS. I think GS. It's your turn.
GS. I like.
Let's see what our magical box brings to us today.
Remember, wherever you go, there you are.
Ooh. Is that kind of related? There's some sort of philosophical tie back.
Wherever you go.
There you are.
There you are.
Where are you?
You are.
Oh, there you are.
There you are.
All right. Well, drop a comment on whatever your platform you're listening in or watching.
If you're watching from YouTube, hit the like and drop a comment. If you're listening from Spotify, follow us and drop a comment. If you are on Instagram and found us, follow us, reshare, and drop a comment. And also, if you are Gen Z enough to be on TikTok, share and drop a comment.
So, drop us a comment. We love hearing your stories.
Yeah, and thanks for tuning in. Till next time.
Stay crazy. Hey.